time in the segment.
Okay, we're back. And in this episode, we have the infamous 10 questions. We like yes or no answers, and you can come back at the end and stipulate, put some texture to it.
Okay.
But first instinct's always really good.
Okay.
Yes or no, or true or false? All right, so I'm going to start. In the first one is true or false. I'm going to read the question, and then you can say this is a true or false question. Adrienne Bell would support Nancy Pelosi for Speaker of the House of Representatives.
False.
Okay. Now, true or false, Adrienne Bell would vote for the impeachment of Donald Trump based on the testimony of the president's former lawyer, Michael Cohen.
True.
All right. Would you classify either the National Rifle Association or Antifa as a terrorist organization?
No.
All right. Could you possibly foresee a reasonable deal where you would support a wall along the Mexican border?
No.
No deal.
No.
Okay.
You said yes or no. She said no.
All right. Just want to know.
Should people that tear down statues of Confederate generals be prosecuted?
No.
No.
Okay. Did the Supreme Court get the correct ruling in the case of the Colorado baker who refused to custom bake a cake for a gay couple?
No.
Did the Supreme Court get the ruling correct when they ruled in favor of gay marriage?
Yes.
Who would you consider to be the current leader of the Democratic Party?
The people.
Okay, we'll go with that.
All right. Name the one issue you wish the Republican you wish you could get the Republicans to change their mind on.
Supporting President Trump.
Yeah, I don't know if that's
Not
an
all.
issue.
It's something she brought. We'll talk more about
Yeah.
that. Okay.
Okay, 10th question. Name the one issue you wish you could get the Democrats to change their mind on.
Supporting the people.
You don't think they do?
I think they need to be more vocal in their support of the people and what's going on in Congress. I think they're being quiet like the Republicans are being quiet.
Yeah, I'd like to hear more on that because that's interesting.
Well, with the talks of corruption, the talks of Russian involvement, I think both parties have been too quiet about it. When you talk about Russian involvement, we should be up in arms about that.
Okay, so which leads me to a question. Actually, we're going to bring that up later, so I'm not going to waste.
Well,
time.
I like to go back to with regards to just being concerned about the people. There seems to be a disconnect between elected officials and the grassroots, everyday people.
I agree.
And in your canvassing in the counties and neighborhoods of talking with individuals, what are you hearing from people, or how do you plan to make sure individuals feel like they're being heard? Like I don't have to make a $25,000 donation to get an appointment with you.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's one of the things that bothers me the most is that there is a lack of communication, there's a lack of touch, there's a lack of caring that we see from our elected officials, I'm talking about the federal level, and the people. They are so far removed. Most of the people I talk with have no idea who their representatives are. They do not know what district they live in. So my talking to them about representing them in Congress is something totally new. For some that I've visited with, they've not had a politician knock on their door ever to talk with them. And so for me, there is such a big gap between the elected representatives and actually the people that they represent. People feel left out. And so when I say the issue that I like to see, when I talk about Trump, of it being something different, because we are not having the checks and balances that we need in our government. We have a president that has just been allowed to run amok. And no one, no form of government is saying, you know what, you can't do that. You've crossed boundaries. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican. We are Americans. And we see American being attacked or infiltrated by another government. And we're just sitting back like, oh, that's okay. Well, it's not okay. And to the people out on the streets, it's not okay. For people to still be without housing and having lack of support, it's not okay. So the leader, I think, of all these parties should be the people.
Okay. So would you agree in the statement that Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, in their message, represented two sides of the same coin?
Yes, I do. I think Trump talked to a certain subset of people. Bernie talks to a certain subset of people that have been ignored. People don't like being ignored. And they've been ignored for so long. There are so many people hurting. When you go to communities and communities are hurting, that hurts because we're living in the richest country in the world. And you go into certain areas and it just looks like we're in a third world country. So yeah, people are hurting. People feel neglected because there is no touch going on between federal representatives and the people.
Okay. Let's see, we want to expand on a couple of these questions. Now, you said Donald Trump on the one issue with the Republicans, but policy-wise, is there a policy or something that Republicans you wish that they would change on?
No, I'm sure there's a lot. What's the top? What's at the top of the pyramid? Yeah, what's at the top of the pyramid?
I'm going to say healthcare, because they were going to vote, and they did vote against healthcare and did not even need a replacement. We just want to do away with it, and that I think is inhumane because people need healthcare. People need to know that someone cares about them, and to just do it for whatever reason is an issue that I think they need to realize the American people have the right.
So I want to bring something up about healthcare. Back in 2010, was it when President Obama passed his healthcare plan?
I think it was
2010. A lot was made about healthcare in different countries around the world, and one of the plans I saw that made a lot of sense to me was they said, well, everybody in Denmark has health care. And the government, it's a constitutional right by their government. So I was like, okay. But then I found out the federal government does not actually mandate health care on the individual basis. They mandate that each county shall provide health care for all the inhabitants of that county. So in Galveston County, Mark Henry and the Board of Commissioners would be tasked with negotiating for a health care plan for everybody in Galveston County. And what that did was it took it out of the federal government's hands and it brings it down to the county level. What are your thoughts on a more novel situation or a more novel approach such as the one they use in Norway, rather than Uncle Sam just getting in and saying, this is the way we're going to do it, given that certain areas of America might have different needs?
Look, when you look at Texas, and Texas refused Medicaid expansion, and that caused people to be without necessary resources that they needed. When you look at the fact that Texas is one of the worst in insured residents, we don't show that we have make the best decisions regarding a person's health care. So I don't think Texas would be a good state to be able to implement their own. Not saying that the county couldn't, but at the state level, we just haven't shown ourselves to be good. We've closed health clinics because we wanted to make it about one issue, when it's not about one issue, when it was about a woman's health care, overall health care, but we made it about one issue and closed clinics. Well, now you have women driving hundreds of miles to see a doctor. So in the ideal situation, I think you make it smaller and smaller pockets to where you can take care. A county takes care of a county because we're going to take care of our residents. But right now, I don't see Texas doing that.
Okay.
Well, we addressed the Republican side, and back to the Democrat. I know you said the people, but an issue or policy or area that Democrats could improve or change their mind on to maybe come closer to, I guess, where Republicans are. So if healthcare was the issue on the Republican side, what policy or issue on the Democrat side do you think needs to be changed?
Since we have a GOP, and I'm thinking since we have a GOP Congress and a Senate and House, it's like most of the policies or things that are being enacted are going with what is Republican, what the Republican electors want. Yes. So it's harder for me to just think of what the Democrats need to be doing to get on board with.
Is that something that the Republicans have done right that the Democrats should have gotten on board with?
I think the Republicans really do right in showing unity. I know that's not an issue.
I know it'll come as news to them, too.
I was about to say.
But they really do. They really do stick together. But that's not an issue. But I think that's one thing they do right.
Okay.
It's, good or bad, it's one thing that they do.
Okay, so there's healthcare. Okay, that very mainstream. Education, very mainstream. But I would argue, and I have constitutional support for this, not just a crazy reading. I would argue that the federal government has no role in education, other than from the civil rights aspect, where we make sure everybody has access to education on an equal basis. So I would put forward that while I think, and Sam thinks, and you think, very strongly that education is underfunded, I would put forward that if you want to fund education, then stop having DC take tax money or borrow it from overseas to redistribute where they see fit and keep the money local, because the locals would have better knowledge on where and how to spend those resources.
I have one desire, and that is to ensure that we have an educated society. And I do know that the guidelines show that the states are responsible for educating their residents. And we have states that don't fund education. I can sit and say, I am for education all day long, but I won't give you a dime toward education. Then what I'm saying does not back up my money.
Right.
And where it's going, which is something that we have in Texas going on. We know that we need education, but education funding has been cut. The budget continues to be cut. So we're saying on one end, well, education is important, but then we say on the other end, but I'm not gonna pay for it. Those two don't go together. What I am for is early childhood education, and to make sure that we educate our children starting at age 3. Where they have an education. I have a 4-year-old grandson, for an example. He's going to pre-K now. He goes half days. What do you do with him the other half of the day? I mean, how can you work? And
he got dressed up, he went to school, might as well keep him all day.
Might as well keep him all day. Or, he goes half a day. What do you do with him in the morning time? How do you work when your child goes to school half a day? And then you got to pay child care costs. Have you seen child care costs?
No, I know. I'm well, yeah. But it still goes back, would the children be better off if we passed, I think it takes 2/3 in each house, if we passed an amendment that said the states shall provide an education to a certain standard for everybody from ages 3 through 12th grade, rather than implementing specific educational programs?
Well, we're implementing and providing funding, because you're still providing funding to the states for Head Start program. It's not that I'm running a Head Start program, it's that the different areas have Head Start programs, but you're being funded. Because it's a direction, just like No Child Left Behind. It was a huge direction, but it gave states direction for education. And we have not agreed on there's no national education standard. Common Core is taught in some states. Well, Texas, we're unique. We have our own standards, but we got to start somewhere. We don't have national standards of how we're going to educate our children.
I agree with everything you're saying. I just want to shut down the Department of Education because I think a dollar goes in, 60 cents comes out, and the school districts look at DC and these programs and say, "Oh, it's free money." It's not free money because it comes from, we've borrowed it from overseas, or we've taken it from the taxpayers. And I just don't think the people in Washington D.C. know best how to allocate those dollars for education.
You know why? One of the things, I'm not for shutting down the Department of Education. We have legislators who have no education experience background that are making decisions. So of course you're right. We need educators that can better make those decisions.
Well, I think that there were some benefits of the program. Take, for instance, even in my personal life, when I went to A&M, I received a Pell Grant. The Pell Grant at the time represented a third of the cost of my education. So today, the Pell Grant at the same university where my son is now, which he doesn't qualify for, because the Pell Grant did what it was supposed to. It raised me up to a level that we should be in a position to help him with his education. Maybe we can't pay the full amount. But the thing is, for students, there's a Sam Collins out there today, or a child out there that's just like me. Single parent, had passed away, living with grandparents. My grandmother and grandfather was on a fixed income. There was no way for them to help me with any college expenses. And that Pell Grant today only represents maybe 21, 22% of the overall cost. So I think that we miss an opportunity to make an investment up front in the lives of some of our young people. Early childhood is great too, but even for those individuals that difference, that Pell Grant and not having to pay that back meant I borrowed less money.
Right.
I think, to your point, getting out of the education part, when the government guarantees student loans for students to go to some universities that are overpriced, kids don't know what they want to do yet, but because that money is guaranteed, the school's going to get it anyway. I think that needs to be changed in that if the students don't complete, or if there's not a certain level of
Achievement.
then the government shouldn't guarantee that money as far as loans, because now you're giving the children today less in the Pell Grant. You're giving them a bigger student loan. So when they get out of school, whether they graduate or not, now they have the debt from the student loan, and they have the debt because they borrowed the money to give to them.
I'll give you a great example that all takes place within 5 miles of where we sit today. There is a job at a healthcare facility very close to us, a very large healthcare facility. They have had it open now for 6-8 months. Okay, it pays about $20 an hour. Okay, you think $20 an hour? Okay, but that job has to be filled by somebody who has a nursing degree, and they cannot work more than 19 hours a week.
Has to be limited
Now,
to
who
19.
is going to go and get a nursing degree,
Pay for a nursing
pay for
Right.
a nursing degree, and then come out and automatically go into debt just to get a job?
Right. Or part-time.
It's absurd.
It's a part-time job in 19
Yeah,
hours.
and things like that drive me insane because I'm wondering, somebody's trying to game the system here.
Oh, they are gaming the system because they're 19 hours.
19
They
hours.
understand exactly why they're limited to 19 hours.
Yeah, but yet they're demanding. So instead of giving the $20 to somebody who's qualified but doesn't have the degree, they're mandating the degree. That degree comes with an expense, and it really
Yeah,
I'll stop.
And the other thing about, and we're almost 20 minutes now. So
Yeah.
we probably need to take a break. This is Sam Collins and Norman Pappous with candidate Adrienne Bell and on Meet in the Middle. So we'll be back in just a few.